Okay, welcome back to Veterinary Compassion Project. I'm Dr. Erin Holder, and I'm very excited to be here today with Dr. Katie Kangas.
Thank
It's a
you.
yeah, thank you. So excited. So Dr. Katie Kangas is well known for empowering pet parents across the globe with actionable knowledge, holistic care, and beneficial products, helping pets to be more resilient to disease and live better quality lives. She owns and operates Integrative Veterinary Care, a private practice offering holistic and integrative healthcare options for dogs and cats. While the practice is physically located in San Diego, California, Dr. Kangas meets with clients via telemedicine across the globe. In addition, she's principal partner of Share Your Bowl LLC, a business focused on education, and Dr. Katie's Remedies, a new line of truly natural products to enhance the well being of pets. Her areas of expertise include gut health, dental health, nutrition, and functional medicine with an approach focusing on preventative health and supporting natural healing or wellness through many holistic options in combination with traditional veterinary medicine. She is the author of hundreds of articles published in Veterinary Journal and pet magazines, a frequent guest on pet focused podcasts and radio shows, as well as an in demand speaker presenting locally, nationally, and internationally. Thank you so much, Dr. Katie, for being here with us. I'm very
Thank you.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. And I didn't even want to shorten your bio at all because what's so important to me in reading and listening is this holistic approach that you've taken on with your animals, and no doubt because it has benefited you in your life. So
Absolutely. hmm
let me start off by asking you a question. When did you know you wanted to become a veterinarian?
I'm told that by my mom, literally, she was like, by the time you were 3, I was pretty sure you were going to be a veterinarian. So that's pretty cool. It's hard for me to remember exactly when because it was when I was a child. So yeah.
You know,
Um,
I find that with most veterinarians. It wasn't like that with me. I was later in life, a late veterinary bloomer, but so many veterinarians, it's like embedded in them from a very early on age, and they just have this trajectory toward it.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, I knew in grade school, I knew in, middle school and high school, it's like, I'm going to vet school. And so I went straight in from high school and, yeah, it was something I always knew my passion of, like that love heart connection with animals. And I just knew that I wanted to work with them to support their lives to be better. So, and the cool thing, Erin, though, is that in the evolution of my, career and through that whole process, especially once I became holistic, and we can talk about that, but that was 15 years into, my career is when I went holistic. But what I really realized at that point is that not only I mean, that's when I really realized that not only was I there to support pets' lives to be better, but to support their humans' lives to be better. And and we do that in every aspect of veterinary medicine. You don't have to be holistic or integrative to be tapping into that beautiful, energy of helping people through helping their animals. But when you're doing holistic, it's like this extra bonus from my vantage point anyway, because I've had so many clients tell me, I mean, many that say, they're like, I can't believe that I've gotten healthier and my other, my spouse, my children, my whatever, my family members, human family members, we've all gotten healthier because we met you to help with our pet's health. And then they're like, oh, I'm feeding my pet, better and fresh food and paying attention to these things and doing supplements and doing lifestyle changes. And then they're like, well, gosh, I should do this for myself, for my kids or whatever. And so the really rewarding thing for me is that it got so much more comprehensive and encompassing than I had even expected from the beginning.
Absolutely. And I love evolution, right? It's an evolutionary process because we get into vet school and we have no idea really. Even, me who got in later in life, you have kind of no concept of what veterinary medicine really is. You have no concept of what you're going to face when you graduate and how sadly prepared maybe we are from a Western medical standpoint, but how not prepared we are in so many different aspects. So it leads me to the question of, after you got out into the real world of veterinary medicine, what were some challenges that you faced?
Well, I mean, I was quite young because again, I went straight into vet school and I graduated in 1993. So I've been practicing for 32 years, which is incredible. I can't believe I can say that. But I would say I felt like personally for me, and I'm sure most vets feel this way, one of my big challenges when I got out of school is even though, of course, we've had all this training, you get out and you feel like you don't know much. And so, fortunately for me, I stepped into my very first practice that I stepped into, and this was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because that's where I was from, where I grew up. I went to school in, veterinary school in Wisconsin, and I stepped into a practice that had 5 veterinarians, which was so awesome. I might have been the fifth or I was the sixth, but regardless, I had a whole team of experienced people to support me in my learning process. And I do know other classmates who literally went to a practice where there was one other vet or maybe two other vets, and one of them was gone when they were there, so that they would, be on trading days, and they got very little tutoring and mentorship and support. And and it's tough as a veterinarian. You're stepping into this very intense profession, where people are relying on you to know your stuff, to help their pet and to help them. And it's a very humbling, vulnerable, and sometimes difficult feeling to feel like I don't know enough to be as helpful as I thought I was going to be when you're going through vet school and all this intensity of vet school, and you're pouring your time, your brains, your heart and soul into all this learning, and you get out and you feel like you're supposed to be ready, and then you get out and you're like, I don't really feel ready. So,
So
and I'm sure, so many professions, I mean, clearly, I'm sure MDs, but MDs probably have a lot more internship time, forced internship time. And of course, in current veterinary medicine, you know, landscape, so many vet students now graduating are going into, more internships and more specialty and stuff even than 32 years ago. When I graduated, we didn't
yeah.
have as many specialists, and now we do. But today new grads face other stressors, and there's a lot of stressors, and we could even get into what I think is somewhat of a stressful situation in our veterinary profession today is all the corporate, that most veterinary hospitals are being bought up by corporate
Yeah.
entities. And from what I can see and hear and talking to so many colleagues, is that really is starting to represent a situation that most veterinarians, that's not why we went to vet school. It's not, it's not really aligning with the feeling of how we want to present ourselves and have a working capacity in in our field every day. And so I feel like that's a big deal with what's going on right now currently. And I think a lot of younger veterinarians getting, or newer veterinarians recently out of school, are becoming disenchanted with the corporate situation where a lot of the art and individuality of practicing is being lost, and it's getting into a very regimented, almost cookie cutter kind of situation. Is this is the protocol, this is what we do, and there's a lot less
Art.
individual thinking process and contribution from each practitioner.
We lose the medical art in
Mhm.
that. Yeah, and we talk a lot at VCP about all the different contributing factors to burnout and compassion fatigue, and there are just so many out there. to tackle. We have, financial issues, we have corporate takeover, we have a lack of mentorship for some patients. We have a very interesting relationship sometimes between clients and veterinarians, and boundaries and lack of boundaries, and also traumas that we all had in our past, and we bring that to our workplace. So there are just so many different triggers that can bring on compassion fatigue and burnout, and also graduating with not a realistic expectation of what it means to practice veterinary medicine. And so I'm wondering, after you graduated and you went into, luckily, a wonderful experience where you did get a lot of help and mentorship, was there a time where you felt like, gosh, this isn't maybe what I signed up for, or maybe I need to choose a different route? Or did something happen in your life where you're like, maybe this is not what I'm meant to do, or I need to shift somehow?
Yeah, so that's such a great question because I'll have a unique answer, and I'm sure, most people are gonna have this unique situation to respond to that. But I think one of the beauties of veterinary medicine, one of the beautiful things about our field is that there are so many different niches that you can choose and that you can evolve into. And the interesting thing for me is that I only initially stayed in private practice for my first 2 years. So I got 2 years of some good seasoning. I wasn't like this massive seasoned experienced veterinarian, but I was in a very busy practice for 2 years and I did a lot of surgery and a lot. So it was awesome. I jumped in, I learned a lot. And 2 years in, and I'll just back up and say in veterinary school, I tracked a lot in my fourth year, clinical, practical experiences. I was at that time really wanting to do wildlife and exotics. Okay. And so 2 years after doing, general practice with dog and cat, small animal, I got an internship at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. And I cruised
Nice.
out to Virginia and I lived in the Shenandoah Valley in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was absolutely beautiful, right over the mountain from Charlottesville, Virginia. And I did wildlife for a year there. And then I worked in for another year, I worked in a couple of practices, a feline practice and a general small animal practice. And then I moved out to the West Coast and have been in San Diego, California since. So I've been here for like 25 years. But I got to do a lot of wildlife, which was my love. Then when I moved to San Diego, I found a exotics practice. And so it was general practice too. So I was still working with dogs and cats, but I was doing a lot with birds and reptiles and, rabbits and everything. So that was such a fun time for me because I was really doing things that I was so passionate about, but still in general practice. So still learning and having this awesome learning curve as a veterinarian to just expand my skills. And then interestingly, talk about niches. My next niche that I fell into accidentally, or, universe has plans for us all and everything happens the way it's supposed to, but I fell into shelter medicine. And I
Big
started
change.
working,
Yeah.
yes, I was doing spays and neuters for some of the local community, like Feral Cat Coalition and all this kind of stuff, and so I met people, and then all of a sudden somebody offered me, like asked if I wanted to interview at San Diego Humane Society and SPCA. And I interviewed and I was actually given I got the director of veterinary medicine position at San Diego Humane and SPCA in 2002, and I was there for 5 years from 2002 to 2007 as the director of the medical department. And it was a big accomplishment. I was in my early 30s or mid 30s maybe. Um, and it was a big deal because the Humane Society and SPCA at that time was going through a massive growth and development phase. And I was the standing director of medical when we moved from a crummy little old facility into this grandiose new building, expanded the medical department by like 3 times, et cetera, et cetera. And I continued to be a shelter vet part-time for another 10 years after that. So I was a shelter vet for 15 years. But the reason I left in 2007 after 5 years as full-time director there is because I got passionate about holistic. And that happened because my own doggie at the time, whose name is Asti, and I'm just going to show in her memory and honor. This is
Yes,
Asti. Yes, my beautiful girl.
beautiful.
Oh, yep. So at that time, Asti was like 14 years of age and she was having health issues. And I was running out of sort of options with our typical conventional medicine, toolbox. And so I'd always had some interest in holistic and natural healing, but I just hadn't ever had the time and sort of fortitude to just, learn more about it and jump into it. Didn't know a mentor. But my girl Asti inspired me and pushed me out of my love, for her to find a veterinarian in my area who was a holistic integrative expert. And that was Dr. Keith Weingart, who is my very dear friend, of course, now. And I have so much love and appreciation for him. But anyway, my doggie Asti literally did like a massive changeover from acting like this aged 14-year-old to jogging again. And, she got another 2 years of amazing life when I thought that I was losing her very soon. So from that point on, I'm like, oh my gosh,
What
this
is this
is what
magic?
I can't go back to, like, this is what I want to do. And so I resigned from shelter medicine and I went down to the Chi Institute in Florida. And that's where I studied acupuncture, became certified in acupuncture, then took food therapy programs, herbal programs, and then fell into one of my niches within integrative, which is functional medicine, and got a lot of training there. And so, just to round that out, then to answer your question, is one of the coolest things, at least that my career thus far did for me and demonstrates for other people, other veterinarians, is that there are so many different things you can do just within our field. And each time I was doing these things, I was wholeheartedly getting so much reward and so much passion and fun and interesting and learning from, general practice, wildlife and exotics, shelter medicine, and now holistic and integrative that I've been rooted in for 15 years now. And, it's been such a fun, it's been such a fun process for me, really has. And not that veterinary medicine isn't stressful. And, I've had plenty of stressors along the way. And, we can talk about how that all applies, but in the grand scheme of everything, I've been really happy with, how things went, and I've had so much reward and adventure through this whole process that has felt really, really good. And, I really appreciate so much.
Well, and I think it warrants like just a pause to reiterate that really important message. And that's to anybody listening to this who may feel stuck in a job or not feeling like they have options. And the reality is that there are so many different options within our field. And while it may be painful and maybe you feel locked in financially to a certain job, breaking free from that and going to learn something and reinvigorate yourself is such a great way to help with burnout and compassion fatigue. And
I
so you just
love that you said that. Even the word invigorating, that was so perfect that you do. I mean, and you know, finding something that enriches you and invigorates is the perfect direction to go in when something excites you, you know,
yes. And
then
you
it
did this naturally.
yeah, I did
Yeah,
it now.
you just naturally you said, "This is exciting, I'm going this way. This is exciting, I'm going this way." And look at the reward it brought you. You're over 30 years in practice. And so I just wanted to just pause just for a minute to reiterate that to anybody listening who's feeling stuck and feeling like they can't move. They can, and there are different options. And I'm really happy that you brought that up. So, but it's not always glorious and glamorous.
Right.
It does get stressful. And it doesn't mean within the veterinary field, it could be personally something happened. There could be an event that creates so much trauma and stress that it begins to wear on your body. And I know that this happened to you. And so I would love for you to briefly touch on what it is that really created this enormous amount of stress for you. But most importantly, what did you do to help yourself and what can others do to help themselves?
Thank you, Erin. Yeah, makes me happy to share this story because, so many of us, I mean, all of us, have life struggles along the way. And when you're in a career that's really intense, and, we all know we're all veterinarians, so we all know the intensities that we face in our career, in our, workspace. And then to have personal things, throughout our life that come up, and, just the intensity of all of that together can, sometimes really knock you down. And in 2017, so we're talking 8 years ago at this point, I really hit a low in my life. And it was because I was dumped out of a 12-year relationship, and and unexpectedly, like blindsidedly. And I thought life was going great, things were cruising along, and all of a sudden, boom, my life was so different than I was, had and was expecting. And shortly after that, you're struggling through all the personal stuff. I got to move, I got to, do all these things. And I all of a sudden, like a month into all this grief, and I was grieving a lot, and just, kind of in that victim mentality, like, oh my God, this was done to me, and why, and blah, blah, blah. The thing, the process we all go through. And all of a sudden, I started having extreme lower back pain. And I had never, I mean, I was 38 or whatever it would have been. No, I was in my early 40s. And I never had had back pain before. And I really struggled with, where did this come from? But I kept, especially being a medical person too, a doctor, trying to find the physical reason of why this was happening to me. And being holistic and integrative at that time already, I was plugging into for myself every modality that I know can help the body to heal and that I recommend for my animal patients or perform for my animal patients. Acupuncture, chiropractic, energy healing, laser, herbal. I mean, I did everything. And I spent, honestly, I probably spent $10,000 in that year or more, maybe $15,000 at least, trying to heal myself, but trying to plug into things that would help me to heal. And then fortunately, I finally, this is actually funny, it was one of my clients who knew me really well. And I would come to work in back pain and I would just be grimacing. And I'm like, oh, it's a struggle through this. And she happened to also be a holistic health practitioner. And she told me, she's like, I think you're stuck in, like, you have limbic system impairment because you are basically like a PTSD situation where, something happened in your life that was so traumatic for you emotionally that you are literally, your brain patterns start going into like fight or flight, like you're just, you know, in that, in that dynamic, in that vibration. And everything that happened, I was always analyzing it in my brain from this fear victimized standpoint. And I finally started delving into learning more about this and the spiritual side of things, like what is going on here. And it was the most amazing, life-changing process for me to realize that I didn't have to depend on somebody else to help me heal, that I was repeatedly finding either resources of people literally verbally telling me that lower back pain is very well known amongst anybody that's, even a holistic healer, but definitely into the spiritual, part of healing, is lower back pain is known to be emotional basis. Even if there's a physical, I'd had x-rays, I had all this stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, you have this, and blah, 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 and your LS. And I'm like, but they're like, but you've had it your whole life. And I'm like, so why all of a sudden do I have back pain? And there was no
Right.
injury, it didn't make sense. And when I finally realized and was told enough times and found enough resources that kept saying the same thing, is that I had to address my emotional state and then I could let go of this pain. That I was keeping the physical pain was very real. There was nothing, unreal about that or fake about that, but it was from emotional. It wasn't actually from an underlying physical basis. And I learned, resources and tools to plug into. And as soon as I gave myself the power and recognized that I could actually make a difference, I healed. I healed within a few months. My back pain was gone and it has never come back. So actually, I should say it has never come back to that extreme, not even close. There have been a few times over the, just a few times in the last 8 years where I recognized a little bit and I was immediate, like, what's going on in my emotional, field? What's going on in my biofield? And I know what to do now. And I was able to, completely change things without ever getting to a significant spot. So it's been a
That's
beautiful process.
It's so amazing and such an important thing to talk about. And I think an even more, I'm going to make this huge leap, but an even more important thing to talk about to our beautiful veterinarians who are strictly Western practitioners who haven't put their toes into the water of holistic medicine and think maybe we're over here doing some crazy stuff. I ask these wonderful veterinarians who we need very much in our lives, what do you have to lose by trying these modalities? Because we can all, as a group, really understand and acknowledge that the trauma that we may have gotten previously in life, or maybe now, or maybe trauma from work, like it's stored within our bodies. And until we actually turn around and face it and deal with it, can we then move forward and go on to heal? What a wonderful way that you just described that, what we talk about a lot on VCP and how you were able to heal yourself. And so for those guys who think we're out there in woo land with our holistic craziness, there's actually so much proof and goodness. And I encourage those veterinarians who are suffering to tiptoe their feet into the waters for themselves to try and get help and to seek different ways. And there's lots of different ways. There's so many different ways. We've got somatic healing, we have acupuncture, we have ART therapy, we have tapping, EFT, I think is the tapping therapy.
Yep.
You don't have to relive the traumas. There's homeopathy that you can help deal with traumas. There's so many ways that you can go back and be able to go
Yep.
forward again.
Indeed. I love how you laid that all out. And many of those things that you mentioned are things that I was plugging into. And everything helped for me, for my situation, just to share my process,
Yes.
everything I could feel it making a difference and it would help me feel better for, several days or, but ultimately I didn't make that shift in my body until I went into the emotional piece of it. And everybody's journey is different. Everybody, what works for everybody can be different. But what worked for me in that context and in that space was branching even a little bit more into what can I do for myself. And I will say that as a holistic integrative person, I mean, I do plug into a lot of tools in the health category, and exercise has always been such an important thing to me, not only to stay healthy but to stay sane and to
Yeah.
feel balanced. And we all
Yeah.
know that moving the body and blood flow, and that it's so good not only for your health but your mental and emotional status. The challenge for me at that time is I was suffering from severe back pain. So I'm like, woe's me, I can't even work out, I can't even exercise, I can't do all these things I want to do. So I was in a real pickle because I'm like, this is my outlet and I can't even
Yeah.
freaking do that right now. And so I had to go deep. I'm like, what can I do? And so I started meditating. I started finding, and I could even name the research. I started finding, recordings, even YouTubes, things that would help get, spiritual, guides and stuff that would just give direction and advice and cues on how we can, you know, learn these things for ourselves. And one of the things that I found through some of these teachers and these resources is that one of the best ways to heal and just feel better and come through a process is to do anything that raises your vibration. Because when you are in despair or pain or grief or anger or you know resentment, guilt, any of these negative emotions, they're all low vibration. And they've done, I mean, modern day scientists, you can do studies and measurements and everything, and you can literally measure people's vibrational energy. And when you're feeling those low states of emotion, your vibration is very low. And when you are feeling joy and interest and excitement and adventure and love and all those kinds of things, you literally measure with a higher vibration. And one of the things I learned from all these beautiful resources I was tapping into is that if you're constantly just thinking of what's wrong, and even just trying to think about, how do I get out of this situation? How do I get out of this terrible situation? Your vibration is still in the terrible, because, and the best way to rise above that is literally to focus on anything that brings you joy. Anything. It could be listening to awesome music if you can't exercise. It could be meditating, which I totally plugged into. I started doing just slow stretching and, easy yoga, restorative yoga, instead of feeling like I had to climb a mountain and work out and all this, strenuous stuff. And tapping into my other things, like in the holistic realm we just talked about, flower essences, essential oils, those things literally change your vibration. But anything that brings you joy, watching a fun movie, taking a bath, and just plugging into as much of that vibration as possible. And the more your focus goes to those things, the less focus your emotional status is staying in the what's wrong. The woe's me about the pain or the life situation or whatever. And slowly, more of my focus shifted to these things that were fun for me and joyful for me. And then the pain started subsiding and all the despair and the grief. And I was able to really pour more energy into where I was going and where I wanted to go in my life than what had just happened to me and where I had been. So,
And what better way to plug in, the perfect way to say it is to plug into a community whose entire intention is to raise the vibration and to help you feel better. And so
mhm.
that is a very important segue into Veterinary Compassion Project's monthly Zoom meeting, the first Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We can get on there and you don't need to say anything. You can just listen. But by listening and feeling a part of a community who gets it, it's one thing to go home to your family and say, this is hard. It's a very difficult and different level of hardness, for a lack of a better word. Like, it's hard what we do. And to be in a group of people who understand and who get it, and some are feeling great, like you're feeling great about where you are in veterinary medicine, and some who aren't, being collectively together can also help do that. So even if you're not to a point where you can go do a yoga class. You just don't have the energy. You're just so tired. You certainly can lay in bed and put an earbud in and come join us, talk about veterinary medicine. And I think that can be a wonderful first step in the process of healing. So, but you start all these things and you do all these things and you went through this incredible transformation, but it's hard to maintain it. Like, you can't just go through this process and then be like, awesome, I'm good, I'm done. Because life is a lot and things come at us every day. So, what do you do on a daily basis to maintain that higher level of vibration or that peace, I think, within
Yes.
yourself?
Thank you, Erin. I make it a priority to, do some sort of exercise every day. I like to do a lot of variety to keep it fun and keep it interesting and feel, really good and inspired by it. And, we all change, and different, things will arise that you can change up your routine. But I definitely plug into outdoor stuff too. I mean, nature is such a healing, and interestingly, at the HVMA, of course, that we were both at, there were actually lectures this year that included forest bathing. I mean, that is like freaking cool,
How about
and
that?
how the energy of nature and the trees, and again, it's measurable, like they can measure it, the frequency of what you feel when you are out in nature is literally making a difference. And I mean, everybody just intuitively knows that being out in nature is very helpful and supportive to feeling better, and even just the fresh air and all that kind of stuff. So I try to get out regularly, and whether that's hiking or beach walking or bike riding, whatever, that is immensely beneficial for my emotional, mental, and health state. I do, I meditate regularly most days. I plug into little, you know, cards and like daily message journals and stuff like that to get that. And even some of my, I mean, I actually had it sitting right here, but even some of my cards that I do, like I'll pick a card each morning and kind of get a little message. The universe has your back is one of my
Yes.
favorites. And Louise Hay, who's amazing, How to Love
Love her.
Yourself.
Yes.
Right? Like just little
Awesome.
things that just feel this little spark of inspiration every morning. Like you just feel support, coming through to you in different messages. So I plug into things like that. I also find it very important to me, to keep my energy up and, health too, is to just also focus on eating well, supporting my body to live well, because that also supports you emotionally. And I know very well, because I've got so much nutritional, education background, in functional medicine nutrition, that, even though when we're feeling down, we may gravitate to junk food, and, we can live the 80-20 rule. I mean, I think it's a really healthy balance to 80% of the time, or most of the time, you're making choices that are, really health giving and that sort of thing. But not to where, you're not enjoying and having some time where you can make other choices and be on vacation and all those kinds of things. But for the most part, I feel really good when I know that I'm eating right, eating things in a healthy choices, and taking some supplements that make a lot of sense to stay healthy, keep my immune system up, keep my energy levels up. And so that's definitely part of my routine. And then staying balanced by making sure that I support my personal life as well as my professional life, because we do all get into veterinary medicine because we love that aspect of how we want to spend our lives with helping animals, and they're people. But the amount of intensity, I love that you mentioned boundaries, because that's always been a big issue for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of veterinarians, because people who get into very caring professions, caretaking professions, oftentimes, there's a lot of difficulty with boundaries, and that really, you know, drains us from a lot of our personal side energy. And so I do try to really focus on maintaining boundaries from work to personal, but also even within personal life, and feeling okay about saying no.
Yeah.
A lot of us, including me, have FOMO, and I want to say yes to everything.
Yes.
And learning that that will drain you more, and that you really need to prioritize like what excites me and what, really makes me feel good about saying yes to that, and holding back sometimes and having some personal time, and really savoring that time, that either with myself or with my select community around me, that helps me keep feeling jazzed and supported and loved and all that kind of stuff.
And don't you find that that one small step in the right direction is really a small step down a wonderful mountain? It just rolls and creates this bigger and bigger effect, that you take one small step for yourself, you realize how good it feels, and then you want to take more and more steps. And then you really
Yes.
learn to prioritize yourself, because in the thick of veterinary medicine, especially when you're first out, you put yourself at the very bottom, and we can't continue to nourish our patients and our clients if we don't put an oxygen mask on first before we take care of everybody else. It's the very
Yes.
common thing that everybody's saying is that we've got to really take care of ourselves first.
Yep.
Um, so this brings us, I think, to a close, although I really have so much more to talk to you about, and I really want to bring you back because this has been super fun, but also just very informative for people because here you are smiling, beautiful, 30 years practicing veterinary medicine. It is absolutely possible to do it. It just takes effort to give to yourself, and don't be afraid to give to yourself. It's just a necessity. So thank you
Mhm.
so much, Dr. Katie, for being here with us. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It makes me feel very good to help, just create more community amongst veterinarians in our profession. And it's such a beautiful thing that you have created to support everyone. So thank you for having me be a part of it.
Thank you.